Hey friends, real estate prices in Denmark are up 20% year on year, which is a humongous jump. But it appears that finally the prices are slowing down. It appears that we are reaching a peak. What I'm gonna do in this video is to tell you specifically what are the underlying trends behind prices and what they mean specifically to you as a home buyer or a potential home seller. I want to start with a short story to give perspective. I heard from a case in Karlsruhe that a specific apartment was sold in January 2021 as a project apartment, meaning an apartment that was not yet built, so it's something that will be delivered next year. And this apartment was sold for 3.7 million Danish krona in January. Now, the same apartment, which as I said is still not yet built, now got sold in September of 2021 for 5.3. So we're talking about more than $1 million in price increase for an apartment that has not even yet been built, and that's only 9 months. So when we say that, okay, finally prices are slowing down, this is the baseline that we're talking about. We're slowing down from that type of price increases to something more normal. But that is now part of the past. Now looking into the future, into autumn 2021 and then into 2022, there are 4 key trends that will likely mean that prices will stabilize, and if they rise, they will rise a lot slower than they're doing now. 1. Real estate prices can't rise 20% year on year all the time. So we had here an extraordinary year with 2020-2021 with a pandemic and extraordinary circumstances. We have seen a huge stimulus. We have seen a lot of people being home and they are more interested in having a nicer home. These are things that, again, hopefully will be in the rear view mirror soon. And yes, we had seen price increases in the US, in Western Europe and Japan and Asia and so on, but Denmark was at the top of the list of potential or of all these different countries, how high the price increases were. So just to give a bit of perspective, it's not that this can just keep happening. This again has been likely a fluke. It could still mean that prices stabilize at a higher level, but to see 20% year on year, that's just not gonna happen again. It's not like the real estate prices are Bitcoin. Maybe in my words, maybe I'm wrong on this, but again, it's not that banks will start loaning more money than they can at the moment. So they are allowed to loan between 4 and 5x your yearly income. They're not gonna be next year or loaning 6 to 7 times your yearly income. That's just not possible and they're not allowed. That's why one thinks that we are reached more or less how high we can go, at least on this, if the salaries and so on don't improve. 2. The government is under pressure to do something. When you have a 20% increase year on year, there can be some unintended consequences. The first one is that some people might be left out of the housing market and demonstrate against it and be very vocal about it. You have now some, for example, student groups that have been demonstrating in Rathouspladsen in Copenhagen and so on, complaining that the house prices are too high and they just can't get into the housing market. And let's say they miss on opportunities of seeing these price increases and see like one of the saving opportunities for young people go out of their opportunity list. And the second one is that when you have such a high increase, it means that you can potentially build systemic risk into the economy. Specifically, what it means is that if you have, for example, now prices falling like 10%, 15% next year, you could see that some people might not be able to pay their loans back, or they will see that they have a negative equity or they're completely underwater and so on. And if that's the case, again, that could lead into serious financial problems. And in a context like that, governments are under pressure to try to act and do something about it. Specifically, there's something called the Systemic Risk Council, which has issued a declaration that basically the government needs to officially reply to, which suggested that the interest-only loans, this meaning that the loans that you only pay interest and not the principal, and I made a whole video explain them here, and I think they're a very good deal, so make sure you check that video. These interest-only loans will be only issued to people that put a 40% down payment when you buy in a house or an apartment. And as you know, the apartment down payment normally in Denmark is between 5 and 20%. So if you need to put double that could be a stretch for a lot of people, and that would mean that a lot of people will not have access to these interest-only loans. In practice, if you remove this option from the table for a lot of people, that means that some of these people will not be able to buy, or they will not be able to buy as expensive as they would like to. And in that context, you expect less demand for flats, and if you expect less demand, you might see prices fall. So again, it's not clear whether this will happen or not. As of now, as the prices are cooling down, the government's under less pressure to issue an order such as this. But if we see this coming through, we would definitely guess that prices could be impacted. 3. Interest rates are rising. So we're seeing interest rates going from 0.5% fixed for 30 years, which was what we had last year, to around 1.5% fixed for 30 years, which is what we're seeing now mostly. Again, these are super low interest rates, and in a big context, I mean, this is a minuscule jump. But if you think about a 5 million Danish krone apartment, 6 million krone apartment, 1% of that, so that extra little jump, that can mean like that is real money. And it could mean that some people that were thinking about going that high might not be able to, because the banks will not give them the specific loan. But will we see interest rates rising to 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%? The reality is that nobody knows. We're at the moment right now in an incredibly complex economic experiment, in the sense that central banks have been printing money like there's no tomorrow. There have been stimuluses across the board, checks to people and so on. And one could argue that eventually that money should be paid back. And if it's not paid back, that it should be basically monetized. And if that's monetized, we expect that interest rates would raise. But the reality is that nobody knows. In a normal situation, if we could call it a normal situation, one could argue that it's very hard for us to see, with all this debt and all this printing and so on, the interest rates to be still around 0.5% fixed for 30 years. 4. The 2024 tax law is getting closer. In 2024, the Danish government is supposed to enact a property tax reformation, which in effect would mean that people that own apartments in the big cities, so like Copenhagen or Aarhus, will expect to pay between 20 to 50,000 krona more in taxes, property taxes per year. Again, I'm doing a very vague ballpark figure here because the reality is that nobody knows. But what everyone knows is that at least for apartments in the big cities, you'll get a very big hit in your taxes. The law is supposed to be cost neutral, and it's supposed to mean that houses will have lower taxes and a bit more in the apartments. But again, this is a law that is quite unpopular with a lot of people and has already been postponed. It was supposed to be enacted this year in 2021. It has been now postponed to 2024, and nobody knows if it's going to be postponed again. It could be that it is. I would personally hope it does. If it does get through, and if it does get enacted, it could mean there will be a huge drag for property prices, and people expect that if this law goes through, that at least apartments in the big cities would get a 10% or close to price reduction, or if not even higher. The reason people expect that prices will fall is that these extra taxes will not be paid until you move out of your current house. So for example, in my house here, I will not be paying higher property taxes until I move. I will get a tax credit and will only pay that the moment I move. And yes, when I move, then I will start from scratch in a new apartment, and then I will need to pay the higher taxes. But what it means in practice is that if I pay, for example, 5,000 krona a month on taxes on my current apartment, I might need to pay 10,000 on the apartment I moved next door. And that's on top of the mortgage and so on and so on and so on. So when doing your calculations, you might be thinking twice before moving and saying, hey, you need to watch out here. In conclusion, prices are finally stabilizing. But what does it mean to you as a potential buyer if you're still looking into getting into the housing market? If you want to, in my opinion, like if you want to do like the Carlsberg guy and buy something in January and sell it now in September, you're up for potentially getting burned. You're potentially getting into a very risky scenario. If you are the other type of person who's looking into the medium and long term, and you're looking to buy something and stay there for 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, then I'll say, okay, you can still go ahead and buy. Even though, okay, you will be paying 20% more than people paid like a few years ago, that still doesn't matter because in the long run, you'll be better off. I made a whole video over here where I explain my rationale behind this and what are the underlying trends that I see that why in the long run, you're still okay buying if you're looking into the medium and long term. With that, thank you and all the best.